Just Off Broadway from 1942 was the sixth of the 7 movies in the Michael Shayne series starring Lloyd Nolan as the wisecracking gumshoe. And he stars here with Marjorie Weaver. Now in this one, Shayne has jury duty. And wouldn't you know it, someone is killed during the trial, and it's up to him to solve the mystery, with only a little bit of evidence tampering and disorder in the court along the way. I thought this was a fun film, and I'll give a summary of it, spoiler-free, and then offer some closing thoughts.
What are you messing around this trunk for?
Well, now, Pop, you don't think I'd do anything illegal, do you? I'm on a case.
Case? Yeah. Say, that reminds me, ain't you on the jury?
Oh, good old Pop. You know, I knew you'd understand. Now, you forget that you've seen me, and I'll cut you in on the reward. But don't forget, a slip of the lip may sink a ship. Oh.
Well, the film opens up with a big crowd outside of a courtroom, and the character Rita Darling shows up, played by actress Joan Valerie. And she seems to be very popular with the crowd, with people all wanting her autograph. There's a photographer there who wants her picture for the newspaper, and hey, it's actor Phil Silvers, Sergeant Bilko himself. So he plays the photographer Roy, and also here's reporter character Judy, played by Marjorie Weaver. And she's been in a couple other Michael Shayne films as well. Each time, it's a different character that she plays. So court begins, and Rita takes a stand with this DA character McGonagall, actor Grant Richards, asking her questions about her whereabouts at the time of the crime, and we find out she is a singer at the Blue Dolphin Club. And as she continues, we see that the character Michael Shayne, Lloyd Nolan, is in the jury box listening to the case. It looks like he's been picked for jury duty. Which, I don't know, does that really happen if you're a private detective? But, whatever. So, Rita has been accused of murdering her fiancé, Harley Forsyth. And she talks about going to a club and seeing him with another woman, Lillian Hubbard, played by Janice Carter. She continues that later that night, Forsyth wanted to see her, so she went to visit with him and then found him lying on the floor dead. Well, the character Henry Randolph is called to the stand. It's actor Leyland Hodgson, and he's a butler who happened to be working next door in the same building, next to Lillian. And he's asked if he saw Lillian going to her apartment around the time of the murder, and he's all nervous about it. But before he can give an answer to the court, someone stands up and hurls a dagger at him, hitting him in the chest, and then the assassin quickly flees. Is that Abe Lincoln? Well, Michael Shayne, during all the commotion, quickly jumps up, grabs the dagger, and hides it under a table. I guess it had fallen out of the body. I don't know. That part was a little weird, but we'll go with it. And Judy spots him doing this, of course. So the judge brings all the commotion to order and gives instructions that the jurors are required to stay. So Shayne has been assigned a room with this little bald guy, Spurty, actor Chester Clute. But a little later, he's able to sneak him some sleeping pills so that he can kind of creep out the window and do his investigation. Well, Shayne sneaks back into the dark courtroom to investigate, and he's tripped by Judy, who is also there snooping around, and she insists that the two of them work together, which he reluctantly goes along with, explaining that someone has killed this Randolph character to stop his testimony against Lilith. But who was it and why? Well, first they go to the apartment to do some investigating, followed by a trip to a vaudeville theater, at which a knife thrower, Count Talmacchio, actor Alexander Lockwood, is doing his show. So they go in, they snoop around his dressing room, and Shayne finds a knife that is identical to the one that killed Randolph. This Talmacchio arrives, sees Shayne going through his stuff, and knocks him out. Good thing he didn't stab him, and then he flees. So Shayne comes to, and he and Judy, they track him down to a warehouse, but they discover him dead with a brooch in the shape of a dolphin. On it is the message reading, "To Rita from George." Well, the security guy at the warehouse sees him and corners him with a gun and then proceeds to call the police. But Shayne is able to make a break with the help of Judy, and the two of them sneak away into the night. They head to the Dolphin Club and take a table and listen to Lillian sing. Shayne also spots the club owner, George Dolphin, actor Don Costello, another actor who was also in Sleepers West. Now, Shayne is spotted by the photographer from earlier, remember the character Roy, who happens to be at the club, and he spots him and thinks that maybe he snuck away from his jury and he really wants to get a picture. Now, Shayne manages to sneak away dancing with Judy, and also puts on a silly fake beard to get out of the room. He then goes to speak with Lillian, who denies that the brooch that he found was hers. However, she does admit to dating the character Forsyth before Lillian did. Well, Shayne sneaks away, but on the way out, Roy manages to snap his picture. Uh-oh. Now, Shayne is convinced at this point that Rita and George are involved in the murders, so he tracks down the jeweler who made the brooch and convinces him to testify in court the next day. Meanwhile, Roy brings the picture that he took of Shayne to his editor. But Judy is there at the same time and kind of sneakily sets fire to it. And when Roy heads off, she convinces the editor to get rid of the negatives, as Shayne is actually working on the case. So back at the hotel, Shayne is able to kind of avoid the photographer who's been tracking him down. There's a little bit of silliness as Shayne dresses up as a repairman in order to avoid detection. So Roy finally tracks down Shayne at his room, where he pretends that he's been in bed asleep the whole time, completely innocent. Silly guy. Well, the next day at the courtroom, the case continues, and Rita and George deny any knowledge of the brooch, claiming innocence about everything. Now, earlier, Shayne had reached out to the DA with a letter with the details of his investigation, and it's here that the DA more or less allows Shayne to get up, leave the jury box, step down, and go into full lawyer mode. Calls Lillian's attorney, John Logan, to the stand. And with very little time left, I'll let you watch the ending of the film for yourself to see how this wacky detective court drama concludes. So my closing thoughts on this was that while I found it entertaining with a couple chuckles, this was probably the weakest of the Lloyd Nolan, Michael Shayne series so far. I still enjoyed it, but films in this series like Sleepers West or Dressed to Kill were just so much better, I thought. Richer stories, more interesting characters, and so on. And I just wasn't that drawn into this story, and in fact, the supporting characters seemed kind of shallow and poorly defined. And oddly, actresses like Janice Carter and Joan Valerie sort of look the same, so that added a little bit of confusion to trying to follow the story that's going on. But the film's only about an hour, so they got a lot going on, so maybe that was part of the problem. Maybe a longer film might have helped. However, Lloyd Nolan is still a hoot as the character Michael Shayne, and I did really laugh at him in this film, at his gags, his mastery of disguises, including the Smith Brothers beard and his oily elevator repairman gimmick. He's always just a lot of fun to watch. I'm currently reading his biography, and as an actor, I just have a tremendous respect for him, his acting, his range, and I really enjoy any role that I see him in. Now, Michael Shayne, though, is probably the character I think he's played the most perfectly. So it's going to be sad when I get to his last film, Time to Kill, which is the final in this series, but that'll be coming up pretty soon. And Marjorie Weaver was a lot of fun as his partner in crime in this film. This would be her third and final appearance in the Michael Shayne series of films as well. But yeah, I think there were just a few too many things that just struck me as, well, a little too ridiculous in this film. And I know it's a movie, but, starting off with Shayne picking up the dagger at the courthouse, basically tampering with evidence, getting his fingerprints all over it and then hiding it, really made no sense. And nobody in the courtroom, jury, or investigators thought to look around for it. Nobody spotted it pinned under the desk, but whatever. I've mentioned this before in other reviews I've done, but whenever there's a film with some sketchy court situations, I love to bring it up with my aunt who practices law. And she's usually quick to point out that no, the type of silly thing in a film like this would never happen in a real court. I asked if a juror could ever stand up, get out of the box, and begin to question someone on the stand, and she said that was completely ridiculous. In a real court, the judge would instruct him not to do that, and that if he did it again, he'd be found in contempt, and also probably be removed from the jury and a motion for mistrial granted. But hey, it makes for an entertaining movie. So yeah, there's one more film in this series to go, Time to Kill, and that would be followed 4 years later with Hugh Beaumont taking over the character in a 5-film series for PRC Films, which I believe are in the public domain, so that's great. So I do have to get to those eventually. Hugh Beaumont, that should be great. Wally, Beaver, haven't I told you two to stop horsing around? Now finally, and this is only slightly related to the review, but because Phil Silvers was in the film, I just have to say, you have to go and check out the Phil Silvers Show. It aired on CBS back from 1955 to 1959. These are really funny, and I have some linked below. I actually have an order placed for the DVD set, but don't tell my dad. Anyhow, Silvers plays the character Sergeant Bilko, and he's stationed at a small army post in the fictional town of Roseville, Kansas. And the story is about the soldiers of the Fort Baxter motor pool under the command of Bilko. From the episodes I have seen so far, there's very little actual army work done, and rather the premise is various goofy sitcom gimmicks like get-rich-quick schemes of the sergeant or his finding ways to manipulate others to do work for him, that sort of thing. Phil Silvers' delivery is hilarious, and I really laugh out loud at these episodes. It's really a great series to check out. Hey, now look at that. You got 2 reviews for the price of 1. Well, let me wrap up the main review. Just Off Broadway, which is a title that honestly had nothing to do with the movie. It was a fun but honestly forgettable Michael Shayne detective story. It starred Lloyd Nolan and Marjorie Weaver. As mentioned, maybe not the best of the series, but I always try to have a positive outlook, and there were still some laughs. Lloyd Nolan is always great, and his pairing with Marjorie Weaver was fun to watch. The two of them are really great together. And if you do practice law, you'll probably roll your eyes at some of the gimmicks of the film and tampering with evidence and so on. So just watch the movie and enjoy it for what it is. It's a silly detective film set largely in a courtroom. I enjoyed it, warts and all. I think it's a fun movie, and it's one worth checking out.